It all began in the mind of Windy City native Gene Shepard, whose talent for humorous, folksy storytelling made him a popular TV and radio personality for decades. He used biting, relatable satire to comment on ordinary, everyday American life, and despite being more fiction than fact, many of his stories would lean heavily on his own nostalgia of growing up on the south side of Hammond, Indiana, a suburb of Chicago. Shepard's radio shows were mainly broadcast out of various cities in the Midwest, but were heard all over the country. He also had various stints hosting his own TV shows, and many of his published short stories were collected into a series of novels, probably the most well-known being 1966's In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash, the main inspiration behind what would eventually become A Christmas Story. Enter filmmaker Bob Clark, who began his career in the late 60s directing low-budget B-grade horror films, his most famous being the highly influential 1974 slasher Black Christmas. But he never forgot where he was the first time he came across one of Gene Shepard's radio broadcasts.
I was in Coral Gables, Florida. I was in the late 60s. I was just out of college. I was working in the Miami film industry. Quite a story itself. And I was driving to a date in Coral Gables, and I turned on the radio and I heard this man telling this very strange story about Indiana and something about a light pole and all that. And I got quite fascinated, but I determined at that time I've got to know more. Who is this guy? And I started looking into Shepard. I got his book, and then I determined I had to do this as a movie. So that's how it all began, and that was a beginning of a 12-year sojourn. What am I talking about? Closer to 15 years to get the movie made eventually.
Enthralled by what he heard, Clark spent years trying to get a movie made based on Shepard's work, but it wasn't until the unexpected success of his 1981 teen sex comedy, Porky's, that Clark finally convinced MGM to give him a budget to direct A Christmas Story, which he also co-wrote with Gene Shepard, the man whose decades worth of radio broadcasts and short stories had inspired it all.
This is Gene Shepard, and I'm reading from my own work, the novel entitled In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash. And I'm reading the first story in the novel, which is entitled Duel in the Snow, or Red Ryder Nails the Cleveland Street Kid.
During the 70s and 80s, Gene Shepard had written and narrated several made-for-TV movies that aired on PBS, and while each featured a different cast, they all followed the Parker family and focused on the older brother, Ralphie, commonly considered the fictional alter ego of Shepard himself. The first of these films was 1976's The Phantom of the Open Hearth, which even included a precursor to the now iconic scene in A Christmas Story where Old Man Parker receives his prize leg lamp in the mail.
Would you believe what this is? It's a lamp.
We stood silent and in awe at the sheer, shimmering, unexpected beauty of the major award.
And while the Parker family has had several different incarnations, obviously none of them are nearly as beloved or recognizable as director and co-writer Bob Clark's 1983 holiday staple, A Christmas Story. It's the early 1940s, and young Ralphie Parker would give anything to get a coveted Red Ryder BB gun for Christmas. But the harder he tries to be a good kid in order to get one, the more trouble he seems to find himself in.
Son of a bitch.
Bob Clark wanted the film to encapsulate many of Shepard's short stories, not just the main one that inspired Ralphie's longing for a Red Ryder air rifle. So the script, which Clark co-wrote with Shepard and Shepard's wife, Lee Brown, takes the relatively simple main plot and peppers it with short little vignettes that add many memorable character moments and endless quotable lines.
Fragile. It must be Italian.
Of course, it's the pitch-perfect casting that really makes the film pop. Originally considered for the role of Old Man Parker was, strangely enough, Jack Nicholson, and this was after The Shining. But it eventually went to veteran character actor Darren McGavin, who gives Mr. Parker a big heart buried deep under a gruff exterior. In casting Mrs. Parker, Clark sought out two-time Oscar nominee Melinda Dillon after seeing her in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In casting the two Parker sons, young Ian Petrella was cast as younger brother Randy, and 12-year-old Peter Billingsley, who already had several movie, TV, and commercial credits to his name, was cast as Ralphie, while Gene Shepherd himself brought along his cozy radio voice to narrate the film as the reminiscing adult version of Ralphie, a similar device that would later be used in hit films like Stand By Me and TV shows like The Wonder Years. Unfortunately, A Christmas Story got a somewhat tepid response when it was released the week before Thanksgiving in 1983, but thanks to countless airings on cable and the growing popularity of home video, A Christmas Story would soon become one of the most watched and well-loved Christmas movies of all time.
And it's the kind of movie that everyone could identify with, and from those clips, we might have given the impression that it's sort of a Norman Rockwell movie, but in a way, this is Norman Rockwell as filtered through the pages of Mad Magazine or the National Lampoon, because Gene Shepherd has an edge to him.
Yes, he does.
And in this material, he's kind of satirical, and he kind of remembers the bite and even the violence of being a kid and thinking about things so passionately that there's just no room for compromise.
Now, like any cult classic, A Christmas Story has its loyal following, but what makes this movie's fan base particularly unique is its fierce devotion and massive reach. Traditionally, what defines a cult film is how it initially failed to generate much business at the box office, but would amass loyal fans over time for a variety of reasons, be it a changing appreciation for a movie's artistic merits, newer technology that makes it easier to discover lost gems, or even the ability to enjoy and laugh at unintentionally bad movies. A Christmas Story was originally released to mixed reviews from critics and a moderate box office performance, but it was out of theaters by that Christmas, simply due to the lack of interest. So many great films just don't hit at that perfect moment and fail to inspire people to see it in theaters. But if you happen to run across one on TV or at your local video store, well, that's a different story. Also, in the early 80s, big holiday-themed movies just weren't that popular. You had It's a Wonderful Life, Miracle on 34th Street, various Christmas Carol adaptations, along with several others, and that's about it. But what A Christmas Story brilliantly did was take the conventional Christmas movie and turn it on its head. Like the works of Gene Shepherd, it brought relatability, cynicism, and a bit of an edge to your traditional heartwarming Christmas story. It was a snapshot of a dysfunctional American family that you either know or are a member of. But it took a few years for it to find an audience that could appreciate that, and with repeat viewings on TV and video, its fan base got stronger with each passing year. Whenever the film would run on the TBS cable network, the ratings got so huge that by 1997, the network began running it on a 24-hour loop every Christmas Eve into Christmas Day, a marathon that continues to this very day. Nowadays, the film probably has one of the world's largest cult followings, mainly because, unlike more obscure cult films, this one appeals to folks of all ages and has become a must-watch every holiday season. Nearly every moment and one-liner has been immortalized by some kind of merchandise tie-in, which, combined with how many times it runs on TV every year, I can understand why those who are out of the loop tend to find the film obnoxious. But I hardly think it's fair to blame the film itself for its overexposure.
You'll shoot your eye out, kid.
Despite its Indiana setting, filming originally took place in Toronto, Ontario, and Cleveland, Ohio. Director Bob Clark scouted many cities before landing in Cleveland, which luckily came with its own Higbee's department store downtown, a crucial location in Clark and Shepherd's original script. And to this day, the actual residence that was used as the Parker house still stands in a neighborhood on the outskirts of downtown Cleveland, even though most of the interior scenes were filmed on a soundstage in Toronto.
Hey, Parker, what is that? Don't bother me now, sweet. Can't say I'm busy.
After leaving the Navy, entrepreneur and longtime Christmas Story fan Brian Jones started his own company where he created replicas of the film's famous leg lamp and sold them on eBay. One day, he logged into his eBay account and happened to notice that the original Cleveland house used in the film was up for sale. So Jones took a huge gamble by buying it, repainting it to look exactly as it did in the movie, and in 2006, he opened it up as a museum and full-blown shrine to the film that now attracts tens of thousands of visitors every year. While the house's actual interiors were mostly not the ones seen in the film, they completely renovated it so it would look as much like the film's 1940s style interiors as the floor plan would allow. While visiting, you can go on a guided tour throughout the house, along with a museum filled with props, photos, and vintage paraphernalia located across the street. But before you leave, you must visit its massive gift shop where you can purchase pretty much any Christmas Story related item you could possibly imagine, from a life-size leg lamp, or a pink bunny onesie, to an actual Red Ryder BB gun, or even a bar of Lifebuoy soap.
Over the years, I got to be quite a connoisseur of soap.
The gift shop also features merch from other holiday favorites, including National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, Elf, and The Nightmare Before Christmas. And speaking of the Christmas Story House gift shop, it was during my original visit there years ago when I originally picked up my copy of the Blu-ray. And as far as the special features go, we begin with an audio commentary track recorded by director Bob Clark and star Peter Billingsley. We then continue with Another Christmas Story, a nearly 20-minute long making-of featurette that reunites some of the cast and crew, a brief history of Daisy's Red Ryder BB gun, script pages from a famous deleted fantasy sequence based on the adventures of Flash Gordon, a humorous look at a company that makes replicas of the famous leg lamp, a fake commercial for the leg lamp, and the film's theatrical trailer. But if you're looking for even more Christmas stories, then I'd also recommend seeking out two additional documentaries not included on the Blu-ray, 2008's The Untold Christmas Story and 2009's Clark World, which is all about the life and career of the late Bob Clark. A Christmas Story may not be everyone's cup of tea, but in my opinion, the massive global fan base it's garnered over the years is well deserved, and you can see its influence on some other great holiday films that have been released in the decades since. With countless memorable moments and so many quotable lines, I'll give A Christmas Story a 5 out of 5 final recommendation.
Hey, perfect.
Even in a career that spanned decades, A Christmas Story will probably always be known as Bob Clark's magnum opus. With a perfect cast, a hilarious script, and loads of heart, Clark and Gene Shepard combined their storytelling powers to create something truly special. And even though they've both since passed on, A Christmas Story will live on forever, and its popularity will probably grow even bigger in the years to come.
Wow, that's great.